What else did I see in here? Iwas. I'm just like...
Yeah, no, that was...
Hawas. Why am I thinking Hawas?
Oh, I was thinking ayahuasca.
Yeah, ayahuasca too, but he's in Egypt, and then something starts talking to him and says, "My name is Ayahuasca," and then we end up with Zahi Hawass running the freaking. Why am I making this connection? I don't know, but it happened. Okay.
Now, if he'd have said his name was Iwashole.
Yeah, a wasshole. The Book of the Law served as the foundation for the establishment of Crowley's new religion, Thelema, and its devotees were instructed to follow only one commandment. Yeah, do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law.
Oh my God.
In his book, The Equinox of the Gods, Crowley made this bold statement about its origin. We are forced to conclude that the author of The Book of the Law is an intelligence both alien and superior to myself, yet acquainted with my innermost secrets, and, the most important point of all, that this intelligent is discarnate. The existence of true religion presupposes that of some discarnate intelligence, whether we call him God or anything else. And this is exactly what no religion had ever proved scientifically. The immense superiority of this particular intelligence, Iwas, to any other with which mankind has yet been in conscious communication, is shown not merely by the character of the book itself, but by the fact of his comprehending perfectly the nature of the proof necessary to demonstrate the fact of his own existence and the conditions of that existence. So why do you think Crowley thinks that the book means that this entity has proven its existence scientifically? Do you want to talk about that?
Think of the time period. When was this taking place? And what
early 1900s?
Actually, late 1800s.
Okay.
Well, no, actually,
yeah.
1904. Yeah, there were things going on around that time that, if you kind of start running,
I mean, yeah, we're in the depth here of the
a lot of this started around the time
the spiritualist age, like people were doing seances, and I understand that bit, but still, why does he think that this is a? I don't know.
This is, in other words, he wrote this through automatic writing.
Yeah.
He's saying, in other words, in his, just giving him the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
That this was, he was, I guess, awed by the intelligence of whatever was coming through him.
Yeah. Yeah,
and,
I understand that.
He comments about that this was far more intelligent than him. And, and, you know, for somebody that was very arrogant and thought that he was really, really intelligent, he's kind of suggesting that this was an all-powerful being.
Yeah, I see that. And I also want to, like, going way back here, when he tries this first ritual and fails, are you sort of setting up the idea that this is when...
I'm not setting up anything. That's history.
I know. I'm just saying...
He was warned, do not perform this ritual, because if you don't do it right or don't complete it, you run the risk of being...
Yeah, you don't meet your guardian. It's something dark shows up instead.
Exactly.
And then the rest of his life is set up with this, like, that failed ritual at the start,
turning dark.
Yeah, exactly. That's So I was just saying, like, that's what you're kind of pointing that out, right?
I'm trying to not interject my thoughts into this in the way I wrote it.
Well,
I'm just letting the
facts.
It
seemed clear to me that that's what's happening.
The facts let them speak for themselves, I guess, in a sense. Now, what was going on in my mind as I'm reading this, I'm connecting dots, and I'm saying this was a turning point in his belief system. Notice that and we talked about this earlier about how people try to do things that may ultimately be bad, but in their mind they're doing it for good. Notice he's trying to contact his guardian angel. He's thinking that he's looking to do something good, but yet what came through, without him even really acknowledging it, was not something necessarily good.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So as if Crowley's statements regarding the origin of ayahuasca were not provocative enough, in January through March of 1918, he claimed to have successfully performed an Amalantraf working, ritual to open a door or portal to another realm or dimension. What came through was a physical manifestation named Lam, or Lam. Crowley created a drawing of Lam, which he included in his Dead Souls exhibition held in New York in 1919. The similarity between Lam and the being later popularized on the cover of Whitley Strieber's book Communion in 1987 is striking, to say the least. So yeah, Lam looks like a gray without the big black sunglasses that they seem to wear. Like if you imagine a gray but with small, more normal-looking eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I mentioned during the break, I have a lot of pictures that correspond with a lot of this imagery that we're discussing, and I'll post that. Hopefully, maybe we can get this added to the YouTube video.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, if you send me the pictures, I can put them in the show notes, and then Brandon can put them in the video for sure. Okay, so beyond its physical appearance, it should be emphasized that Lam was said not to be an individual, but a class of being. And in Magic Without Tears, Crowley makes this curious commentary regarding communication with such intelligences. It is, of course, of the very first importance in geomancy to frame your questions accurately, for the intelligences serving the art delight in tricksome gambles. If there is a possibility of assigning a double meaning to the question, you can bank on their finding it and deceiving you. Yeah. During one of his communications with the spirit world, Crowley is shown imagery of nymphs, of fauns, and Pan, the god of the wild. He is shown hundreds of visions where the angel of the aether assumes different masks and games. He is then told that the book has been opened. Ha! Awakening the angels of the aethers. It is not known if this was a reference to Crowley's The Book of the Law or Dies Liber Logaeth. Crowley would join forces with a secret society named Ordo Templi Orientis, OTO, which was modeled after and associated with European Freemasonry, such as Masonic Templar organizations. But under his leadership, the OTO was reorganized around Thelema as its central religious principle. One of the major features and core teachings of the organization was its practice of sex magic, which, as we shall soon see, served as the foundation for other historic workings to come. Although he did not live to see it come to fruition through his writing, Crowley ignited embers that would smolder for decades, eventually growing to a raging inferno, and he would be immortalized in pop culture by the likes of the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, and Ozzy Osbourne. And his mantra, "Do what thou wilt," resonates louder today than ever.
Mm. All right, that was the end of that document.
Yep. Marty's looking for something.
Man.
Yeah. Don't read the heading on the next
Okay. Oh, am I going to keep going? I thought Crowley was the end.
Oh, no.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
That guy seemed like either a charlatan or a fool.
Well, and this is the other thing is like he seemed to be involved in a lot of intelligence operations later on too. Like, did you pick up on any of that?
There are rumors that he was a spy. He at least tried to be a spy.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, he was also, using a lot of heroin and
yeah.
I mean, he was doing all sorts of stuff and mixing different types of drugs, but he was doing it on purpose to reach, alternate states of consciousness. So
isn't there also a possible connection between him and the Loch Ness monster? He buys a house out there, he does a working, and then the monster starts appearing, right? And then one of the Led Zeppelin guys buys that house.
The Jimmy Page bought, Jimmy Page, right?
Which one, the guitar player or the
Yes.
singer? The guitar player is Jimmy Page.
Yes, Jimmy Page bought Crowley's house.
Yeah.
And owned it for a short time and then sold it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Crowley is on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And
yeah.
He's worked his way into
Yes.
our
So
culture.
it's the pop culture, yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole theme of "Do what thou wilt" is definitely
Oh, yeah.
much more prevalent today than it was when he was
Yeah.
trying to grow his religion.
Yeah. And I think that, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I saw that Crowleyism in the Assassin's Creed games, which, in terms of pop culture, they were fairly influential just because, they're massively popular games, but they have the creed in the game is there's an actual creed for the assassins, and it's very close to do what thou wilt, except that it goes something more like nothing is forbidden, everything is permitted, basically. Like, in other words, the rules are whatever you make them.
And the assassins are the Essenes.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Lots of connections.
Yeah. So, while Aleister Crowley was busy conjuring portals and communicating with intelligences from the Aethers, the First World War from 1914 to 1918 was raging in Europe. Military tactics developed before the war failed to keep pace with advances in technology. So, by the end of 1914, the opposing forces were left confronting each other along an uninterrupted line of entrenched positions, resulting in a 3-year stalemate that cost over 1 million lives. One day in 1915, a dispatch runner in the 16th Bavarian Infantry Reserve was sitting in one of the trenches eating dinner with his fellow soldiers as bullets whirled overhead. Suddenly, through all the noise of battle, he hears a loud, commanding voice in his head say, "Get up and go over there." Instinctively, he quickly gets up and moves 20 yards down the trench, and just as he sits, he sees a flash and feels the blast from an artillery shell that struck where he had previously been sitting, killing everyone in that vicinity. No one else heard the voice, which suggests that the disembodied voice may have had a reason to spare the life of this particular young soldier. Maybe it was somehow due to his interest in poetry on the subject of the occult and ritual magic. Or maybe it simply had bigger plans for his future. That young soldier was Adolf Hitler, and this was but one of several seemingly otherworldly interventions that are documented to have occurred at critical junctures throughout his life. So I don't need to go into too much detail about the life of Adolf Hitler, but there are a few salient points I'd like to make. Although Hitler shared an interest in the occult with many of the German people, as he and the Nazi Party rose to power, they expressed an aversion to the fealty to the spirit world inherent in occult beliefs. This initially led to many practicing occultists being thrown into concentration camps. However, there were those within Hitler's inner circle who secretly held such occult beliefs. In 1939, Joseph, how do you say this one? Goebbels?
Goebbels. Yeah.
One of Hitler's closest devotees brought him a letter from a trusted astrologer that predicted an assassination attempt. When the attempt occurred but was thwarted by the prediction, Hitler was convinced of the potential usefulness of occult practices. Initially, funding was provided to research the prophecies of Nostradamus for use in Nazi propaganda. But this was soon expanded into many other areas, and occultism was rebranded as border science, or scientific occultism, to ensure fealty to the Reichsfuhrer and the Nazi Party. As a result of this new policy, over 40 psychics were relocated from concentration camps and placed in a lavish research facility where they were encouraged to cultivate their abilities. Following the overthrow of Benito Mussolini in 1943, the Italians secretly moved El Duce, is that right? Yeah, to different locations to deter rescue attempts. According to Hans Himmler and Walter Schellenberg, German psychics involved in Operation Mars were able to provide the exact location where Mussolini would be held, and acting on that information, a rescue operation was successfully performed without a single shot being fired. The German Navy also created the Pendulum Institute to psychically locate Allied warships at sea. This proved the strategic value of remote viewing decades before Project Stargate in the U.S. Hans Himmler, one of the key architects of the Holocaust, appointed Karl Maria Willigut to head of the Department for Pre- and Early History, which was created for him within the SS Race and Settlement Main Office. Willigut was a former member of the Quasi-Masonic Lodge and espoused deep occult beliefs and claimed to have spiritual powers that allowed him direct access to genetic memories of his ancestors thousands of years into the past. He claimed to worship a Germanic god Christ, whom Christianity was supposed later to have appropriated as their own savior, Christ. According to Willigut, Germanic culture and history reach back to 228,000 BC, when Earth was inhabited by giants, dwarfs, and other mythical creatures. By 12,500 BC, the religion of Christ was revealed, and from that time became the religion of all Germanic peoples.
I think that'd be Christ.
Christ?
Just saying, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're probably right. It was really good who appointed Otto Rahn with the task of researching the Holy Grail and the lost civilization of the Thule. Rahn published the book Lucifer's Court, which speculated that the Holy Grail lay at the center of a cult of Luciferians who practiced an Ur-Aryan religion drawn from Tibet and northern India via Persia in pre-modern times. Accused of heresy and witchcraft, these last representatives of the Indo-Aryan civilization of Thule had been eradicated by the Catholic Church, their teachings preserved by the Knights Templar and Tibetan monks. Thule was the mythic origin of all Aryans, an equally mythic white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired race of wise giant mound builders who were once the masters of the earth but who lost their birthright due to sexual liaisons with the irresistibly seductive members of inferior subhuman half-animal races.
Yeah.
Of course.
Enoch.
Yes.
Yeah.
In his book, The Occult Roots of Nazism, author Nicholas Goodrick Clark states, since 1960, a number of popular books have represented the Nazi phenomenon as the product of arcane and demonic influence. The remarkable story of the rise of Nazism is implicitly linked to the power of the supernatural. According to this mythology, Nazism cannot have been the mere product of socio-economic factors. No empirical or purely sociological thesis could account for its nefarious projects and continued success. The occult historiography chooses to explain the Nazi phenomenon in terms of an ultimate and arcane power which supported and controlled Hitler and his entourage. This hidden power is characterized either as a discarnate entity or as a magical elite in a remote age or distant location with which the Nazis were in contact. In Morning of the Magicians, author Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier claimed that the Nazi leadership was determined to establish contact with an omnipotent theocracy and gain knowledge of its power. It was thought that this power would enable Germany to conquer the whole world and transform all of human life. Alliances could be formed with the master of the world or the king of fear, who reigns over a city hidden somewhere in the east. Those who conclude a pact will change the surface of the earth and endow the human adventure with a new meaning for many thousands of years. The world will change, the lords will emerge from the center of the earth. Unless we have made an alliance with them and become lords ourselves, we shall find ourselves among the slaves on the dung heap that will nourish the roots of the new cities that will arise. Wow. Man.
So the idea is that that whole deal was a plot by, like, aliens to get the world in such a state that they could then,
Well,
like, use it for their own devices or something,
actually,
and now
this is the
it's all
reverse.
screwed up.
This is the reverse. What this is suggesting is that they make a pact with these divine beings, so that, because if they don't, they will be destroyed. This is the Nazi rationale. They're saying we need to make a pact with these intelligences.
Yeah, that last...
Yeah, but that's from the human standpoint. I'm talking about from the aliens.
We don't know yet. We don't really know. It's difficult for us to get in.
Well, the idea is that if they can take over the whole world and change everything about humanity and how we live and whatever, and breed, again, bringing in all the genetic stuff, then they can turn it into something that it's like, you know.
Maybe we'll get into what could possibly be going on behind that. That's difficult to do because it's enough
all
of a challenge
speculation.
to be able to make the point that there is something going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Now, what its intent?
Yeah, so he's just speculating.
I mean,
Right.
I'm speculating based on that idea.
Right.
Yeah.
That, like, there was some initiative or objective to turn the world in a certain way and eradicate certain people,
Well,
so that, you know, they could carry out their designs or something.
look at it.
And then they
Look at it a
Flats.
different way.
Huh?
Wait,
They're nefarious.
maybe
flats.
maybe those objectives are a means to an end. Maybe it's not about the wars. It's about what the wars cause.
Yeah.
They've said it from the beginning. You got to think back of what was said. Everything is. They're very consistent. There's a pattern in here, and it's a very consistent pattern. But it'll be spelled out more as we go further. I start to reveal more of what.
Classic Marty. Next episode.
No,
it's going to
well-
be spelled out.
At least I'm actually disclosing what I believe in this sense, or should I say, what the historical record shows. I don't know that is entirely.
But they could have
objective.
succeeded,
They could have, yes,
right? So why,
or we
so there's a
could be
goal.
headed towards it.
It seems like, there's warring factions out there in the cosmos
Yeah.
over what's going on down here. And so some of them are driving their agenda, which results in all kinds of crazy
At this point,
chaos,
we're really
like in
only
World War
seeing
II.
one agenda,
And then
It
they
would
fail
seem that there's one
because there's
consistent-
another force, right?
possibly, yeah.
But, yeah, it's just-
So which ones are the custodians? The ones that are stopping that stuff from happening, or the ones that are trying to make it happen?
yeah.
See, Bramley, I think he lumps everything together into
Yeah.
one thing, but it's like this makes it more seem like
Well, I think Bramley's premise is, just create chaos. Just make war happen.
yeah, keep them fighting themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe there's, and I hate to put my thoughts into this, but
No,
I
this is
will-
what we're here for.
I will say that
We
it is
bring you in-
entirely.
we bring you in
right.
here.
Maybe it's entirely possible that there is one party, and I don't know. Again, it's sort of like you said, Game of Thrones, that you
Game of Deuce.
that you. It's hard to tell who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. It's kind of
yeah,
blurry. That there's one faction creating chaos and another faction trying to create order, and it's an eternal conflict. It's just constantly,
yeah.
and it's a cyclical thing. But who's who, and for what reasons?
Yeah, because I mean, you could say the Germans, the Nazis, were trying to create order.
Yeah, they wanted.
Yeah, they were trying to
unify
create
the whole world.
They were
and-
trying to create
order.
a religion. Crowley was sort of doing the same thing. I mean, there's again, they think they're doing it for good. It's just their perspective.
Yep.
It's
All right.
crazy shit.
Yeah. This is good stuff. All right, we're almost at the end of this here. So, during World War II, American journalist Hubert Knickerbocker wrote, oh, that's a great name, Hubert Knickerbocker. He wrote, Hitler's power is not political. It is magic. To understand magic, you must understand what the unconscious is. It is that part of our mental constitution over which we have little control and which is stored with all sorts of impressions and sensations. Now the secret of Hitler's power is twofold. First, that his unconscious has exceptional access to his consciousness, and second, that he allows himself to be moved by it. He is like a man who listens intently to a stream of suggestions in a whispered voice from a mysterious source, and then acts upon them. In our case, we have too much rationality to obey it, but Hitler listens and obeys. The famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung recognized that Hitler thought and acted magically. In an interview conducted by Knickerbocker in 1939, Jung defined the nature of Hitler's power as such. There is no question but that Hitler belongs in the category of the truly mystic medicine man. As someone commented about him in the last Nuremberg Party Congress, since the time of Muhammad, nothing like it has been seen in this world. His body does not suggest strength, the outstanding characteristic of his physiognomy is its dreamy look. I was especially struck by that when I saw pictures of him taken in the Czechoslovakian crisis. There was in his eyes the look of a seer. This markedly mystic characteristic of Hitler is what makes him do things which seem to us illogical, inexplicable, and unreasonable. So you see, Hitler is a medicine man, a spiritual vessel, a demi-deity, or even better, a myth. Wow. Episode 143 of Brothers of the Serpent, Gods of Eden Part 2 discusses Aryan beliefs, so we don't want to spend too much time focusing on this reasonably well-known part of history, other than to note one interesting, albeit largely anecdotal claim. Due to his interests in Hitler, the occult, and the UFO phenomenon during World War II, Carl Jung was allegedly asked to offer a personal opinion to a select group at the Pentagon concerning the basis for the surprising advances in Nazi military technology. According to the documents, Jung stated his belief that through their occult practices, the Nazis appeared to have struck an accord with a higher intelligence, and he suggested that the U.S. military attempt to do the same. All right.
And that guy spoke pretty glowingly of Hitler,
Still
didn't he?
another part.
What?
There's still one
I
more.
thought that was the last one. Okay. Oh, right. Okay, now I get it.
You wanna
Last
do-
bit.
We're at the.
That's fine. We'll just finish it up here.
Going along.
Yeah, going long. On October 2nd, 1914, approximately 1 year before a young Hitler's life was seemingly spared by a disembodied voice, Marvel Whiteside Parsons was born at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles. He was named after his father, a wealthy real estate developer known as Jack. Little Jack never had the chance to get to know him, as his parents divorced less than a year after his birth, resulting in his mother, Ruth, addressing him as John. As a young boy, Jack was a loner who spent most of his time reading science fiction. He was fascinated by Jules Verne's From Earth to the Moon and wanted to become a hero that would one day travel to the moon. At age 12, the newly published Amazing Stories became the first publication dedicated to space fantasies and promoted the motto, "Extravagant fiction today, cold fact tomorrow." This quickly became one of Jack's favorite. Jack was different than other kids. He wore fancy clothes, had long hair, and spoke with a slight English accent, picked up from the servants that looked after him. But he also suffered from dyslexia, and these things made him a target of bullying in school. It was around this time when little Jack claimed to have had his first mystical experience when he successfully invoked the devil in his bedroom, scaring him away from occult practices, at least for the time being. One day, a bunch of bullies surrounded Jack in the schoolyard and began beating him. Suddenly, another kid, 2 years older than him, jumped in the middle, pushing them aside and breaking the nose of one of the bullies. He then picked Jack up and helped him collect his sci-fi books off the ground. The kid, named Edward Foreman, was the son of an engineer, and also suffered from dyslexia and shared Jack's fascination with science fiction. The two quickly became best friends, and together they dedicated themselves to bringing the far-fetched science fiction concept of spaceflight to the moon a reality, and adopted the slogan, "Ad astra per aspera," to the stars through hardship. The two began experimenting with homemade explosives, by which time they were in their teens, which got them expelled for blowing up school toilets. In 1931, Parsons heard about a 17-year-old in Germany named Werner von Braun, who was working on a similar concept, and wrote to him telling him of his own primitive rocket experiments. Parsons and von Braun became friends and even exchanged ideas over the telephone on several occasions. Parsons studied chemistry at the University School in Pasadena and got a job at the Hercules Powder Company in Los Angeles, which was the largest TNT production facility in the U.S. during World War I. This provided Jack with access to a wide array of explosive materials and valuable information on their chemical composition. As a result, the backyard of Jack's home was described as looking like the lunar surface due to the craters resulting from their numerous rocket tests. As the rocket experiments progressed, they eventually realized they needed help solving aerodynamic challenges. So, in 1935, while Parsons was attending Pasadena Community College, he and Foreman visited the California Institute for Technology to speak with a graduate student in aeronautics who had presented a paper on the recent work of Eugene Sanger,
Yeah.
and spoke optimistically about the possibility of rockets being used to power aircraft. Keep in mind that rocketry was not considered a science at this point. Be that as it may, the student was impressed by their knowledge of the subject, and although he could not get involved, he directed them to another aeronautical student he thought could help them, named Frank Molina. Molina had written an essay where he stated, "Now that man has conquered travel through the air, his imagination has turned to interplanetary travel. Many prominent scientists of today say that travel through space to the moon or Mars is impossible. Others say, what man can imagine, he can do." This was exactly the type of vision Parsons and Foreman were looking for, and the trio immediately connected. Molina was exactly the missing piece of the puzzle they needed to achieve their dream of spaceflight. With Molina on board, together they presented a proposal to a senior professor in the aeronautics department at Caltech, which was immediately laughed off as a harebrained idea, fit only for Hollywood films and thrill seekers. But Parson was not to be deterred. He decided to go straight to the top and approach the head of the aeronautics department, Theodore von Karman. Theodore von Karman was a Hungarian immigrant who was regarded as one of the greatest aerodynamic theoreticians of the 20th century. Interestingly, von Karman was a descendant of Judah Lo ben Bezalel, who was a scholar, Jewish mystic, and philosopher known as the Maharal of Prague. The Maharal is legendary for his alleged creation of a golem, a creature made from clay to defend the Jews of Prague from anti-Semitic attacks. The Maharal is said to have used mystical powers based on esoteric knowledge of how God created Adam. The word golem appears only once in the Bible, spoken by Adam to God, where he states, "Thine eyes did see my golem," which is Psalms 139, verse 16, which refers to an embryonic substance which is understood to represent the physical form of man before acquiring a soul.
That would have been written by Solomon, right?
Yeah, if it's in Psalms. It does make sense. Von Karman later said he was immediately captivated by the earnestness and the enthusiasm of these young men. Although he could not provide them with funding, he agreed to provide them with a laboratory that would become the Rocket Research Group's unofficial home for the next 4 years. During that time in 1935, Parsons would marry Helen Northrop, who was remarkably accepting of his mixing and storing of explosive materials in their home and garage. The following year, in 1936, an attempt was made to lure Robert Goddard to move his research to Caltech, and Frank Molina was sent to visit Goddard's research facility in Roswell, New Mexico. However, it was quickly apparent that Goddard was evasive and did not wish to exchange any of his findings with Parsons' team. Regarding this, von Karman would later state, "There is no direct line from Goddard to present-day rocketry. He is on a branch that died. He was an inventive man and had good scientific foundation, but he was not a creator of science."
Yet everybody knows Goddard and nobody knows Parsons.
Right. Meanwhile, at Caltech, Parsons' clan earned the moniker the Suicide Squad for what many considered their reckless and potentially lethal experiments. But the Suicide Squad gradually began to gain notoriety outside of Caltech. Popular Mechanics ran an article on them, and a small article also appeared in Time magazine. Because of his increasing stature in the community, Parsons was even asked to be an expert witness in a trial involving a former police officer accused of a bombing that killed a local political activist. Parsons' testimony resulted in his conviction, and a picture of Parsons holding a replica of the explosive device was published by many regional newspapers, including the Los Angeles Times. But all was not well within the Suicide Squad. By 1939, they seemed to reach a plateau in their development that they could not break past. It was around this time that Parsons came upon a book titled Conks on Pax by Aleister Crowley. This book, filled with chapters about hidden knowledge, magic, and demons, was a revelation to Parsons that took him back to his childhood interest in the occult and conjuring. Soon after, he attended a Gnostic mass at the Agape Lodge, which was the Los Angeles chapter of the OTO and Church of Thelema, where he heard the words, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And the crowd responds, "Love is the law, love under will." At the end of the sexually charged mass, the magus announced, "The Lord bring to you the accomplishment of your true wills, the great work, the summum bonum, the true wisdom, and perfect happiness." These words spoke directly to Parsons' soul. Afterward, he partook in cakes baked with animal blood amid sexual debauchery. It seemed that Parsons had found his true calling. Seeing her husband's mounting interest in Crowley, Helen also began to read his books and eventually began accompanying Jack to the Agape Lodge. George Pendle, the author of the book Strange Angel, The Otherworldly Life of Rocket Scientist John Whiteside Parsons, states, as a scientist, he found that Crowley's magic teachings seemed to correlate with the work of the quantum field folks. The illogical nature of the newly coined quantum physics, in which the simple act of observation seemed to affect the physical world, and in which changes performed on one physical system could have an immediate effect on another quite unlinked system, the theory of non-locality, would have seemed to Parsons to endorse the improbable possibilities of magic, and especially the transformative powers of the magician himself. This convinced Parsons that he could manifest his destiny by his own sheer will. When Parsons was initiated into the Agape Lodge, its magus wrote to Crowley stating, I think I have at last a really excellent man, John Parsons. He has an excellent mind and much better intellect than myself. JP is going to be very valuable. As if by divine providence, contemporaneous to Parsons' epiphany, war broke out in Europe, and the chief of the U.S. Army Air Corps approached von Karman to study the critical problem of heavily laden bomber aircraft takeoffs in combat zones with limited-length runways. To von Karman, the Suicide Squad's rocket work was the perfect solution. They received $1,000 to prepare a proposal that resulted in the funding of an actual project. Countless experiments were performed, but they all ended in abject failure. Then, one day, Parsons had his Archimedean eureka moment, when the solution suddenly presented itself before his eyes from what Molina described as communing with his poetic spirits. This download of information was an asphalt-based fuel that Parsons referred to as Greek fire, the mystical, inextinguishable, semi-liquid material used by the Byzantines against enemy ships. This material resolved the long-standing combustion hurdles and resulted in the successful development of solid fuel JATO, or jet-assisted takeoff rocket motors, giving birth to American rocketry. The success of the JATO development inspired Parsons, Foreman, Molina, and von Karman to invest in the establishment of the Aerojet Corporation to design, develop, and manufacture both JATO and other more advanced rockets. But, hand in hand with the increase in rocket technology, was an increase in Parsons' obsession with thelema. Parsons gradually became emboldened in his practice of the occult, and it became a ritual before rocket tests for him to begin stomping his feet and reciting Crowley's hymn to the Greek god Pan. To the great beasts come, lo Pan, I am born, to death on the horn of the unicorn. I am Pan, lo Pan, Pan. I am thy mate, I am thy man. Goat of thy flock, I am gold, I am God. Flesh to thy bone, flower to thy rod. With hooves of steel I race on the rocks, through solstice stubborn to equinox. And I rave, and I rape, and I rip, and I rend, everlasting, world without end. Mannequin, maiden, maenad, man, in the might of Pan, lo Pan, Pan, lo Pan. Did you just make me like read a ritual? Am I just like summoning in everybody's home that's listening to this podcast the great god Pan? In 1942, Parsons opened his home on Millionaires Row in Pasadena to members of the Agape Lodge, which he named the Parsonage. With a large painting of Crowley hanging prominently in the foyer, they began regularly hosting lavish drug and alcohol-fueled open love rituals, much to the discontent of the community. Parsons' hubris reached a point where he began having an open affair with his wife's sister Betty, as his wife did the same with their magus. All the while, Crowley remained informed of the situation and ultimately placed Parsons in the position of religious leader of the OTO. When word reached U.S. Department of Intelligence of the Nazi development of the V-2 missile, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department gave the Suicide Squad an open checkbook to develop a weapon that could deliver 1,000 pounds of explosive over 150 miles. For a project of this magnitude, new facilities would be required. This was to become JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, also known internally as the Jack Parsons Laboratory, located by the Devil's Gate Dam in Los Angeles. By the war's end, JPL employed over 400 technicians. But U.S. intelligence was monitoring Parsons' increasingly eccentric antics, and justifiably concerns did arise. Gradually, a push began to get him out the door, and in December 1944, Parsons was forced to sell his interest in Aerojet for an undisclosed amount, although he continued to consult for them on occasion. As Parsons worked to merge the worlds of science and science fiction, he began spending more time in the company of professional science fiction writers. He had become a regular guest of writer Robert Heinlein. The two had met at the Los Angeles Science Fiction Society. Heinlein, as one of the earliest members of the American Interplanetary Society, was impressed by the true rocket scientist, as was Ray Bradbury, who also spoke highly of Parsons. It was through these connections that Parsons met another science fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard. By 1945, Hubbard had moved into the parsonage and quickly came to dominate the conversations with his worldwide adventures and exploits at sea. Parsons became enamored with Hubbard and wrote to Crowley stating, "I deduced that Hubbard is in direct touch with some higher intelligence. He is the most thelemic person I have ever met and is in complete accord with our own principles." But this admiration was also shared by Parsons' mistress Betty, and the two soon became lovers, much to the chagrin of Parsons, who believed that in accordance with his thelemic beliefs was above petty jealousy. Nonetheless, it was becoming increasingly apparent to all that Parsons' life was beginning to spiral out of control. Parsons wrote to Crowley, "I am so nauseated by Christian and theosophical guff about the good and the true that I prefer the appearance of evil to that of good." The change in Parsons' demeanor was palatable. One of the Thelemites living at the parsonage stated, "There is something strange going on. Our own Jack is enamored of witchcraft, the Humfort, and voodoo. From the start, he always wanted to evoke something, no matter what, I am inclined to think, so long as he got a result." This led many of the followers to believe he had unleashed some type of demonic force, described as alien and inimical, into the house, so they began performing regular banishing rituals. One day, strange noises began emanating from Parsons' room, causing concern. So, when the door was opened, there stood Parsons, draped in a black robe with arms outstretched, in the center of a pentagram before an altar, as his voice rose and fell in a rhythmic chant. Parsons was using the system of Dr. John Dee's Enochian magic, recommended by Crowley to perform certain operations to obtain an elemental mate. Yeah, the Babylon working. Parsons continued to perform the ritual, and a few days later, Hubbard, who was in the kitchen at the time, called out to Parsons saying he had been struck strongly on the right shoulder. Parsons hurried to Hubbard's side, and, in Parsons' words, the two observed a brownish yellow light about 7 feet high in the kitchen. And in a subsequent incident, Parsons heard a buzzing metallic voice crying out.
Where have we heard those two references?
Yeah, right. Soon after, in January of 1946, Parsons and Hubbard ventured out into the Mojave Desert to perform a sex magic ritual known as the Babylon Working. This was an attempt to manifest the whore of Babylon so that she may give birth to the moon child, the Antichrist, written about in Crowley's book of the same name, which dealt with a battle between good and evil magicians over an unborn baby. Interestingly, this plot was revisited in the movie Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski shortly before his wife Sharon Tate and her unborn baby were murdered by followers of Charles Manson, who coincidentally had ties back to Hubbard and the Mojave Desert.
Hold up.
Yeah, reread that. Your mind will do some backflips.
So, let's just, reread that.
Okay. Soon after, in January of 1946, Parson and Hubbard ventured out into the Mojave Desert to perform a sex magic ritual known as the Babylon Working. This was an attempt to manifest the whore of Babylon so that she may give birth to a moon child, the Antichrist, written about in Crowley's book of the same name, which dealt with the battle between good and evil magicians over an unborn baby. Interestingly, this plot was revisited in the movie Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski shortly before his wife Sharon Tate and her unborn baby were murdered by followers of Charles Manson, who had ties back to Hubbard and the Mojave Desert.
Okay. So Tate, so the movie that Tate made,
Polanski.
Rosemary's
Polanski.
Baby.
Rosemary's Baby, yeah.
Was talking about that actual thing, or just the right? It was based on the writing
concept. No, well, we don't know that. We don't know that for a fact. It was, in theory, it was just a story, you know. It's just odd reality. What's the term? Reality mimicking.
Yeah, where fiction seems to be like the book Titan or whatever that was written and published before the Titanic. It was basically about a giant ship that sank out in the North. Yeah.
I just finished listening to that book, Chaos, and it's about the whole what's his name? It's Charles Manson deal. Have you read that book?
No, but I know other things about.
Oh my
how
God,
they
this
relate.
guy! Yeah, so this guy was a journalist, and he was supposed to do some like quick article on one of the anniversaries of the whole deal, and he starts interviewing people, and he gets way down into this rabbit hole, and he's just like, there's like more to this story.
Oh yeah.
And so he keeps doing, and he keeps getting more deadlines pushed back, and eventually he gets dropped by the magazine or whatever. And he still does research, and then he gets hired for a book deal, and he does that, and he keeps pushing the deadline back, and he's digging and digging. It takes him 20 years of digging into this story, and he's still, there's just like these open-ended questions. But it links the whole thing to the CIA and all this kind of
Peter
crazy stuff.
Levenda gets into that deeply. He makes a lot of connections to the Kennedy assassination. There are a lot of really strange connections there that are, really hard to explain. But I try to leave that stuff out. This
Well,
is
it's
an
just relevant to me
anecdote
because I just finished that book.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Synchronicities.
This is crazy, dude.
All right. So during this ritual, the Babylon working, Parsons claimed to have communicated with Babylon and took careful notes of her words, which read, "During this invocation, the presence of the goddess came upon me, and I was commanded to write the following communication." Oh, here we go again. You're going to make me read this.
No, this is
Evil. All right. "Yea, it is Babylon, and this is my book, that is the 4th chapter of the book of law. He completing the name, for I am out of Nuit by Horus, the incestuous sister of Ra-Hor-Kut. Thou hast called me, O accursed and beloved fool. I shall provide a vessel, when or whence I say not. Seek her not, call her not, let her declare. Ask nothing, keep silence. There shall be ordeals. My vessel must be perfect. This is the way of her perfection. The Astarte working, with music and feasting, with wine and all arts of love. And she shall wander in the witchwood under the night of Pan, and know the mysteries of the goat and the serpent, and of the children that are hidden away. For I am Babylon, and she, my daughter, unique, and there shall be no other women like her." Upon learning of this, Crowley stated in a letter, "Apparently, Parsons and Hubbard, or somebody, is producing a moonchild. I get fairly frantic when I contemplate the idiocy of these louts."
Even Crowley recognized.
Yeah, he's
that
like,
they
"What
were-
are you doing?"
Yes.
Upon completing of the Babylon working ritual, Parsons turned to Hubbard and stated, "It is done," in absolute certainty that the operation was accomplished. When they arrived back home, Parsons was met by a 23-year-old scarlet woman with slant blue eyes, giant red lips, and burning red hair. Her name was Marjorie Cameron, and regarding their meeting, Parsons wrote to Crowley declaring, "I have my elemental." Despite her young age, Cameron served as cartographer for the Joint Chiefs of Staff during World War II and was just discharged in 1945, shortly before arriving on Parsons' doorstep. Parsons, and she seems like a, there's a bit of a, what would you call it, a honeypot thing happening here. Parsons and Cameron almost immediately began performing sex magic rituals to incarnate the goddess Babylon. And Parsons' letters to Crowley came more often and feverish, stating things such as, "Thrice blessed, I stand beyond pity or passion. In my heart the light, my eyes turned to the highest. Glory, I cry, glory unto the beast and unto Babylon, and hail unto the crowned and conquering child.
What the hell, dude? It's crazy.
Remember we were shouting about this. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, not
rockets. You dumbass.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
In October 1946, four days after finalizing his divorce, Parsons and Cameron were married. Because of their prior success, eventually Parsons and Hubbard returned to the desert to perform their rituals. After the course of 2 months, Parsons again declared their work a success, stating, "Babylon is incarnate upon the earth today, awaiting the proper hour for her manifestation. And in that day my work will be accomplished, and I shall be blown away upon the breath of the Father." Yep, prophetic words indeed. Soon after, Parsons and Hubbard entered into a partnership which resulted in Hubbard running off with $20,000 of Parsons' savings and his mistress, Betty. Then on December 1st, 1947, the Great Beast 666 died at the age of 72. Old Crowley died at 72. Parsons went on to work for Hughes Aircraft Company until 1950, when the FBI brought charges against him for potential espionage resulting from his application for employment with the government of Israel. Although he was cleared of charges, his top secret security clearance was revoked and he was barred from performing any work for the U.S. Department of Defense. Following this major setback, he was forced to seek employment in Hollywood, setting up explosives for motion pictures. On June 17th, 1952, Parsons and Cameron were set to depart on vacation as he worked in his garage mixing highly volatile chemicals for an upcoming film. Moments later, Cameron heard the explosion that ended the life of the father of American rocketry. The official police report claimed that Parsons was high on drugs while handling a flask that slipped out of his hand, causing the explosion. However, there are a variety of conspiracy theories that claim Parsons was murdered either by the police officer he testified against, Hubbard, Cameron, and or the U.S. government, all of which are plausible. Marjorie Cameron went on to become a well-known artist and actress who at one time lived with up-and-coming actors Dennis Hopper and Dean Stockwell. This is why you quoted Dennis Hopper in the beginning of this. Interestingly, both of these actors played dark, nefarious characters in the movie Blue Velvet, directed by David Lynch. Lynch also famously directed Twin Peaks, a story about a mysterious woman named Laura Palmer, a character who Lynch claims he based on Marjorie Cameron. Wow.
Wasn't Dennis Hopper also like the crazy bomber madman in this movie Speed or something? Who was that?
Yeah, I think so. He was in Easy Rider also.
Jack Parsons was a deeply flawed character who tapped into unknown planes of knowledge that, although he did not live to see it, allowed a man to walk on the moon, fulfilling his lifelong dream. After Werner von Braun shows up, right, who he had been communicating with. That's so strange.
Yep.
For his contributions, NASA named a large crater on the far side of the moon in his honor, but due to all of his fringe beliefs, he was almost entirely erased from history. So let me leave you with this one final anecdote regarding Jack Parsons. While discussing the final days before his death, filmmaker and actress Renate Drux, who was an acquaintance of Marjorie Cameron, is quoted in the book The Occult Explosion by Nat Friedland, stating, "I have every reason to believe that Jack Parsons was working on some very strange experiments, trying to create what the old alchemists call a homunculus, a tiny artificial man with magical powers." Making a golem.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. All of
Shit.
this will make more sense or become more relevant in the next episode. It kind of
That's what he says, folks.
No,
I don't
just
know if
you
you're
hear-
allowed to believe him at this point.
It does. All of this, every bit of information written in this
Yeah.
has a connection to stuff we'll be discussing in the next one.
Okay.
It's
Well,
just
still, that was-
crazy how this, I don't know. I've been going down this weird rabbit hole recently. These books I've been listening to, like how all this crazy, weird, occulty stuff is connected to the CIA and Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll be touching on
And
that.
just like you're talking about the, how these ideas work their way into pop culture. It's like that's a directive
Oh, it's everywhere.
every time.
It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. If you watch, there's a
By the way, the Assassin's Creed that I mentioned, it's nothing is true, everything is permitted. That's the creed.
there are a couple of
That's in those games.
documentaries. There's one called
Do What Thou Wilt.
about Aleister
Yeah.
Crowley, and if you watch that, and then there's another documentary. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. It's called God, the name just dropped right out of my mind. It's oh boy. It's
What were you looking for?
about Hollywood, and how all the occult imagery that's in all of Hollywood. Those are two completely different documentaries, but if you watch them back to back, it's like one seamless deal. You kind of see the chronology of how this worked its way into popular culture.
And by the way, Marty
Check-
is wearing a NASA, JPL, and Caltech shirt. just letting you guys know this.
I wore it on purpose.
He's definitely showing up to force me to invoke demons in the Tangent Cube today.
Yeah, it's great.
And those ritual things I was reading are in red text. Marty, like, could you have made it any more obvious?
Trust me, I was a little hesitant to put that in there, but I thought it would kind of.
Let's just go
Convey.
ahead and read this whole ritual summoning out loud on the show. It'll be fine.
Oh, and don't worry about that star on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be hilarious if it wasn't terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways you have to laugh at it because it's just, I mean, and Hubbard goes on to do what? Creates Scientology, right? This is the whole.
Oh my God.
Maybe
yeah.
we'll get into that next.
What?
Right. So you have all these weird connections, with the
Right.
occult stuff and all that stuff and rocketry and going to space, but we're talking to alien beings possibly or non-human entities. They're involved in rocketry and science. It's a mixture of these two things. And you see how like the occult merges in and then you get like these crazy religions.
Right.
Yes,
All
I
of
know.
this
And they're mixing in with
was a plot.
Thelemic, the whole Blavatsky stuff, the ascended masters, and then you end up with Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard and Parsons and Crowley and just like
And
what
now,
the-
like Watcher's saying, is the religion of Hollywood.
yeah, and
It's
you're just like, what is going on here?
This was a plot to
Yeah.
force everybody to have to listen to the next one because now you got to know where all this was leading.
right. Oof, man.
Well, it's leading straight to the gutter, man.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah.
The gutter of pop culture.
All right. Well,
God.
There were dozens and dozens of books that I had to read to be able to assemble this
yeah. Well, it's
Kind of
it's great.
chronology of that. That was a very important thing. I wanted to make sure that this flowed, that historically you kind of see it, that it flows from one thing to the next. They are linked.
Yeah.
They're not random events.
Yeah. This. And yeah, I agree. The Marjorie Cameron is strange.
I got to go listen to that book,
I sort of
Chaos,
feel-
again. I was planning to listen to it again, but now I'm definitely going to do it. Like,
I tell you
next.
what, I just should have mentioned this. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there was a series called Strange Angel that was on Jack Parsons. It was like on CBS, and when I started watching it, I didn't want to
the
watch it.
CIA broadcasting system.
I didn't want to watch it until after I had read everything about him because I didn't want, how TV or movies are usually not accurate. So I didn't
Yeah.
want to like have false memories of inaccurate information. So I made sure that I did that last. But watching it, I was like, why would somebody produce a show on him? And it's actually very well done, surprisingly. And Parsons is portrayed, and I believe that is accurate to the way he really was, is a very charismatic person. He's a very likable guy. That's why he was able to accomplish what he did. But interestingly, this program go, and they took some liberties. They kind of combined characters to make one character out of, might have maybe been 2 or 3 different characters, and they're trying to simplify it, make it understandable to the public. But it's interesting. I think the first season is like 10 or 12 episodes, and it's flowing along. It's getting really interesting. It goes into, how he starts joining the Agave Lodge and and you see this change in his attitude as he goes along. And then it goes into season 2, which theoretically would be another 10 or 12 episodes, and they still have a lot of story to cover. And about episode 5, everybody's at the parsonage, and they're having their, their rituals, that they're doing there. And there's a knock at the front door, and Parsons goes over and opens the door, and there's a guy standing there and puts his hand out, and he says, "I've been wanting to meet you. I'm L. Ron Hubbard."
Yeah.
And that's where the episode ends. So I was like, "Oh man, this is getting good." Canceled. Gone. Show canceled.
Holy crap.
Of course.
Of course.
But dude, that's the same stuff that Manson was doing. Like he was, he had this whole sex cult thing.
Well, we'll get into. I don't really touch it,
but I'm just saying
Manson was a high-level Scientologist.
Okay. Yeah, he had all this group of girls that would go around, and then like he could just control people. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. People you wouldn't think, there was just, I don't know. It's weird. It's really strange how he just got people to just jump through hoops for him, and
that seems to be a pattern.
Yeah.
You'd say the same thing about Crowley. You'd say the same thing about Parsons. You'd say the same thing
and they're
about
doing
L. Ron
the
Hubbard.
same kind of rituals. Is my point?
Because they're all connected, and maybe we'll have a little bit of a better understanding why after the next one or during the next one.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Or just more questions that you
Tune
won't
in
answer.
next week, folks.
More questions that will not be answered. All right, you guys get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You have an email you want a bunch of people to email you questions? Right. You can't get a hold of Marty there, but you can get a hold of us.
Any rituals.
Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com, for all the podcast-related stuff, including the encyclopedia, the glossary, the Snake Sketch, which is a merchandise store. You can buy t-shirts and all kinds of stuff, including embroidered hats, so check that out. We also have the Pyramid Scheme, which is support for the show. I've added a new support page because some people have asked to be able to support us using cryptocurrency. So I've got a couple of our cryptocurrency addresses there for the podcast. So if you want to support us using Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else, if the address isn't there, let me know. I can get one for you. But the Bitcoin and ETC addresses are up there. So there is a support page now. But mainly through PayPal and Patreon is how we take our support. And we do have Patreon content. So if you join the Patreon,
There's one closing quote you gotta add in there.
What? I thought I went all the way to the bottom of this thing.
Yeah, that's probably not attached.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was very appropriate.
All right, so last quote here from Marty's material. The devil always sends errors into the world in pairs of opposites, and he always encourages us to spend a lot of time thinking which is the worse. You see why, of course. He relies on your extra dislike of the one error to draw you gradually into the opposite one. C.S. Lewis.
Oh, man. That's a good quote.
That is a good quote. All right, you guys know the rest of the stuff. Facebook group, join the Discord, Library of the Serpent run by Jeff. Thanks to History Shift. And thanks to all you listeners out there. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
All right.